Last night, we had Florida Democratic State Senator Gary Farmer on to discuss his support of gun control measures that he has sponsored in the state. Farmer was dishonest throughout the interview. We're not using that term lightly. Gary Farmer is trying to strip you of a basic constitutional right, so we think it's important to correct the record and let you know that he was not telling the truth through parts of that interview. And we have some examples. Just before the show started, news broke that a government security guard at Douglas High in Parkland hid outside the building as Nicholas Cruz murdered 17 inside. We just told you about that. The sheriff had just had a press conference saying so right before our show last night. Here's part.
Went in, addressed the killer, killed the killer.
So we asked Farmer about this right at the top of the segment. It made the obvious point. They're admitting that they didn't protect the kids. Shouldn't they be able to protect themselves? Farmer said, "It's breaking news. I can't really respond to that." Yet as the interview progressed, he began to make up his own facts about it. Watch.
The fact of the matter is, most of the carnage occurred before he ever had an opportunity to be there to stop it.
Well, that's not true. He made that up and then started shouting, so it was hard to correct that. The shooting, by the way, lasted 6 minutes, and Peterson waited outside the building for 4 minutes. But Farmer kept lying, including this. In this bill, owners of the rifles, including many hunting rifles that you designate weapons of war and assault rifles, people who own
Not
them
true,
now,
but keep going. Misinformation number one.
Is true.
Keep going.
Would have to register those rifles with the government. Am I misreading that?
No, that's a different bill. That's a different bill, Tucker.
So we had just read the bill before last night's show and thought that was right. We looked it up again today, and it was right. That bill does require you to register your firearms, not because you've done something wrong, but just because you have them. Farmer says this was his bill, so of course he must have known that, and yet he lied about it, and that's useful to know going forward, and we'll hope you'll remember it. Johnny Joey Jones is a retired staff sergeant who was wounded in Afghanistan, and he joins us tonight. Johnny, thanks for coming on.
Good evening, Tucker.
Good evening. So I think people are so horrified by what happened at Parkland, going back 20 years to Columbine, even before that, that they're open to solutions. And I think a lot of people are open to gun control because it sounds like it might work. You've thought a lot about this. You've been around guns a lot of your life. Would it work?
Well, listen, in the Marine Corps, I learned the war game every move, to look at my end goal and work my way backwards. And that's what I've done for the last week. I've looked at every policy suggested and war gamed it to the end. And it all comes back to the same end, in my opinion. We make a decision. Do we ban all guns or a certain type of gun, which would include confiscation and registry and things that a lot of people, even those in favor of gun control, aren't in favor of? Or do we do more defensive posture? Do we secure our schools, make sure the background checks work, and go down this path that we're already on in a lot of ways, and that we have to go down either way? And so my opinion and what I'm saying through the research and the wargaming that I see and the rhetoric trying to weed through it all is that the first thing we need to do is make sure the background checks we already do work. Make sure the infrastructure and the resources behind our law enforcement, from local to federal, is actually being used. President Bush's legacy is the Department of Homeland Security, among everything else. In a quick amount of time, we were able to take local law enforcement stations that couldn't talk to each other on the radio or even talk to the fire stations and coordinate their communication and their intelligence sharing all the way up to the FBI and further. And if we can't do the same amount of diligence and the same amount of work, if that's not worth our time, if a sweeping piece of legislation simply because it makes us feel better is the answer that we go to now, then we're suffering from the instant gratification that's taken a hold of millennials and everyone else in this country.
Yeah, and kind of missing the point, which is why is our society producing people like Nicholas Cruz in the first place? That might be worth thinking about. But so I wonder if, as you point out, there are already a lot of laws. We have far more restrictive gun laws than we did when I was born, for example, and we have more shootings. Maybe we're not enforcing them correctly. If the government is failing to enforce the laws on the books, why does nobody ever hold the government accountable for that?
Well, right now it's political rhetoric. Right now it's not about what makes our schools safer. I'm sure a lot of people spewing rhetoric feel that way. And let me tell you, I've got a house full of guns. None of them are ever going to kill anyone that doesn't need to die because they're trying to hurt my family. But I'm okay with the idea of bringing in new laws. But when you war game these out, for example, if you ban ARs, well, you're going to have to grandfather in the ones that are here or have a confiscation program. That won't go over well. Timothy McVeigh killed 168 people in a federal government building with a bomb made from fertilizer and diesel fuel because he didn't agree with how the federal government was handling a policy. Yeah. Crazy exists in all subgroups. If you go after and confiscate guns, crazy is going to come out again, and it's going to come out just as bad. So don't start catalysts for people to go out and do other things that are
Exactly.
that are evil and tormented. So I can tell you, if you try to ban these guns, if you don't go that path, you'll do what's called the National Firearms Act. So basically what you'll do is you'll put these guns in a category similar with suppressors and fully auto. And then they become infinitely expensive, and you've created a system where only rich people can own these types of guns, which is unconstitutional in and of itself.
I don't think that would bother Michael Bloomberg, surrounded by armed bodyguards, but you make a good point. Johnny, thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.